What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and guess what? I'm here with
Gersh1.
That's no surprise, because we're back at it answering more questions in another episode of For the Greater.
This is a video series where we answer the questions left by you, the viewer. If you have a question for us, comment down below. Put a question in front of your question, because we get to those questions first. And that is what?
Twist Jane has done. She asks, does the warp control chaos, or does chaos control the warp?
This is a really good question because we want to make sure to outline a distinction between the warp and chaos. When you're a newcomer to 40K, it's easy to kind of see it as two things, right? You go into the Immaterium and it's chaotic, therefore the Immaterium is always chaos. But that wasn't always the case.
No.
The Immaterium in the beginning, when the old ones were around, that was the very first psychically powerful race in the galaxy, they saw the warp for what it is. It's just a psychic realm, another realm that could be manipulated into however you want to. And that's how they were able to build the webway. They were able to do constructs. And a lot of their knowledge was passed on to the Eldar. That's why the Eldar, or the Eldari, and that's why they can now manipulate the warp in very, like, cutesy type of ways, like Wraithbone and singing things into existence. They're using the warp. Or the Immaterium. But then you look over at Chaos, and Chaos is like slaughtering things and trying to provoke ships to come out of their Geller fields to kill them and stuff like that. And then you're like, oh, whoa. So that's something that happened because of the just evilness of psychically powerful races in the galaxy, making the warp chaotic.
Yeah, so back during the age of the Slan, aka the Old Ones, the warp was much more tranquil than it was currently. So like you were saying, with all the sentient beings, especially humanity, they began to put in beliefs into the warp. So all these beliefs coalesced into the Chaos Gods. Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and of course Tzeentch. And it's like they were always there, but they're still birthed at certain points. And that's interesting because with the warp, there is no time. Everything kind of is all at once and it's chaotic. That's why it's very, I guess, chaos influenced nowadays than back then when it was much more tranquil. And that's why chaos is kind of influencing the warp because they have so much power. But the warp itself, the Immaterium, doesn't necessarily influence chaos.
And if it's confusing to you, it's supposed to
right.
be. The Immaterium is a place where, like, just humans cannot fathom it because we live in real space. Mm-hmm. It makes sense to us because we are entities of the warp, but we understand why you would be confused, viewer at home who asks us questions.
Yeah, so like within the warp, it's not just all chaos. There's also other creatures in there that have nothing to do with the Chaos Gods.
Yes, so those things could be warp vampire, warp ghost, all that kind of stuff, and they exist in a part of the Immaterium that's not as chaotic. It's more like the wilderness of chaos, which is something that I got a TikTok, and it was this guy talking about how like, if you want to see something super metal, just sit down and watch like Mother Nature, just basic nature, and you'll realize like, whoa, things are pretty crazy. Like, it seems nice, but not. And it's true because like right now, if we look outside, there is a nest of, like, it's like a bird's nest. Mm-hmm. There are cracked eggs with embryos on the floor. The birds are constantly fighting to protect the nest from like all sorts of different things. You have insects killing each other. Like, nature is hardcore.
It is.
And I think that's what the Immaterium is. The Immaterium, even when it's not dealing with Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, it's still like super metal kind of thing.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's the big distinction between Immaterium and Chaos. Chaos is very specific in the way that they are hardcore and evil. I wouldn't even say evil, but just like, yeah. And then the Immaterium is just like generic evil.
Yeah, I guess if you could say it that.
Yeah.
Evil in quotations, of course.
Yeah. Good question. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, also Jane Twist. I saw the thumbnail, and yeah, you've been following us since the One Mind Syndicate page. We appreciate it. Next one.
Mago Dominus. Why is it that there are so many skulls in Warhammer 40K?
That's a good question. The motif of skulls in Warhammer 40K is a way for the Imperium to venerate the sacrifice of the Emperor of Mankind, who is interned in the Golden Throne, technically like dying or whatever, but still at the same time all powerful.
Yeah, and then you have like a bunch of what's the word? Servo skulls.
Yeah.
That also is all about skulls. You have skulls for Khorne, and just overall the grim darkness of the whole atmosphere of 40K. It's supposed to be like depressing and like make you feel a certain kind of way. And like one of the best things that we associate skulls with is death.
Yes. Also, the whole concept of memento mori. So the Stoic philosophy of like, hey, death is right around the corner, and that's a big part of just the feeling of coolness within 40K. So that's a good question, though. Next one. I have one from Julius Octavian 9472. Which Primarch would girls go crazy for? I think we've answered this before.
Yeah.
And our consensus was that women are complex creatures and they have different likes. So some women will like Rogodorn, other Ferrus Manus, and others Fulgrim.
Yeah, but nobody likes Lorgar.
No one likes Lorgar. He's a little crybaby. It's actually scientifically proven that if you are a man and you cry in front of a woman, the woman instantly wants to murder you.
Science.
Next question.
Verinius 40K. Where do you think the Forgotten Empire that was made by Gilliman will be, and will it resurface in 40K? Like, will the Inquisition discover what was done there and try to go after the Primarch?
That's a good question. I don't know what the
Forgotten Empire?
Gilliman's Forgotten Empire is.
Because isn't that Ultramar?
Unless he means, so during the Calth, no, is it the Betrayal of Calth? The Imperium was divided, or basically Ultramar was split from the rest of the Imperium during the Horus Heresy, because that's what Lorgar wanted to do. They knew that the Ultramarines were the strongest legion. They wanted to separate themselves so that they could invade Terra, or separate them from everybody else so that they can invade Terra. And obviously Gilliman had to create his own Imperium Secundus, which was the first one, right?
Right.
Not to be confused with what is happening in Baal. Or after the Cicatrice Maledictum, but that might be it. And if that's the case, that's like right now, if we found out that, I don't know, Lincoln created his own like union or something like that, like it's just a part of history that doesn't have to do anything with now.
Yeah.
So if that's what you mean,
right.
I'm not too sure.
I mean, if so, I don't think they'll go after the Primarch. For any reason. Dude's a High Lord. He's like in command of the whole military might of the Imperium. I don't think anybody will go after him like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, good question. Enlighten us if that's not what you meant.
Yes.
This next question is by Ed Handel. If you guys were to live in the 40K universe for 1 week, would you do it, and how would you try to survive?
Would we do it? Yeah, I would do it.
For a week? Yeah, just to kind of... so here's the thing. As grim, dark, and as deadly as 40K is, I think you could survive for a week.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like at every corner everything's trying to kill you, even though most stories, most things kind of make it out to be that way. It all depends on where you're put.
Yeah, I think that if we were given a choice, or like if we were like put in a place where statistically we would most likely land, which would be a hive world, and it would be in the Underhive, even though the Underhive is like super evil and malicious and stuff like that, if we were taken out of where we live now and placed in some of the roughest places in the country right now, we would survive for a week. No one just wants to murder you for no reason, kind of thing. You know,
right? You
need to have some value to you so that they can extort. There isn't serial killers walking around in the Underhive. They all have like clans, they all have purpose. They're going to steal from you because they want some type of resource. What does me and the Sound Alchemist have as a resource other than good looks?
You tell me. Apparently this shirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's doable. More so if you're like on a pleasure world. Less so if you're like in like an orc infested like forest or something.
Yeah, if you're in the middle of Armageddon, then you're
in the Octaria sector. You got Tyranids to contend with, orcs to contend with, plus all the other like flora and fauna. If you're on Fenris, Yeah, unless you find like the Norse people, the Fenrisians there, you're probably done because like their summers are super hot, their winters are super cold. Everything wants to kill you, including the plants. So,
yeah. And then last question by Eric9. This is kind of a response to what we were talking about, whether Games Workshop is going too woke. He says, it was never about female space marines. It was about the gaslighting about them existing. So I think the big problem with 40K becoming a little, or like I guess the big problem with Warhammer 40K becoming anti-fan is that they are trying to trick us into believing that new lore is old lore, when in reality there was never any female Adeptus Custodes. The books say it, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, that was the big problem with like retconning things that have no reason to be retcon kind of thing, right?
Yeah, because there's always ways to explain it within the lore. I've heard people say like, oh, it could be some type of creation from Fabius Bile or Belisarius Call, or the gene splicing of like any other races, or any type of like techno, alchemical, biological scientists. There's ways to do it. It's just they decided to say, nah, it's always been a thing.
Yeah, and I feel that Games Workshop's biggest blunder will go down as trying to create female Space Marines, more so than anything else, like Orktober,
Yeah,
which never gave us any org models.
we got them in November.
Yeah, that's not a good Orktober.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel that this topic is going to be a topic that we're always going to be asked about, and it's going to be something that's going to stay with Games Workshop Warhammer 40K forever. But let us know what you think.
That's right.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we'll talk tomorrow.
As always, it's been the Sound Alchemist here with
Gershwan.
and we are out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.